In my opinion, I strongly believe that vaccines should be mandated.
It should be our choice to make sure that we get the vaccine. It's us, it's our bodies.
The CDC has become a political arm of the administration. It wants to control every element of our life.
At a time when Washington seems broken, this group of members behind me came together, along with others, and decided we were going to do something great for our country.
You may have heard that in Washington now, just on the phone, looks like we reached a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, fancy word for bridges, roads, transit system, high-speed internet, clean drinking water.
The money should be going to everyone, and not just to highways.
What can we do about not only the overdoses, but the gun violence in this world?
What could you do to help people, as far as someone in my situation, with receiving pandemic eligibility funds for unemployment?
Helping young people find jobs.
We all need money. They all need money, being as though COVID shut down everything.
As you can tell, we have a lot to cover. Welcome to our very first Fox 29 Pulse of the People Town Hall. Mike Jerrick here. So much going on in the world. We know there is a lot on your mind. And joining us, Delaware Senator Chris Coons. Senator, welcome to the show.
Great to be on with you, Mike. Thanks for the chance.
Sure. This is our very first try. I almost said, here's our first victim. No, you're our first participant, Senator. And I'm going to talk about you a little bit as we look at you. In office at the U.S. Senate since 2010, a Democrat known for reaching across the aisle, as politicians say, working with Republicans and independents to get things done. Stakes could not be higher in our country, Senator, and we're going to try to talk about COVID, the economy, trying to get some help for struggling people. We have questions about gun violence in America, and then something that sounds boring until you hit a pothole, which I did on the way in here, Senator, infrastructure. Where does that bill stand as of this evening? So, yes, a lot to cover, and welcome. First of all, I just want to know, how's your health? I know that you were on Senator Manchin's houseboat on the Potomac over the weekend, and Senator Lindsey Graham, he tested positive, and you were close to him. How have your tests come back?
Mike, I'm doing fine. I tested negative yesterday and today, and the physician, the doctor who cares for members of the Congress, advised that as long as I have no symptoms, they think I'm fine. I'm going to continue to mask because I'm often in rooms full of people when we're voting on the floor of the Senate, as I'll likely be later this afternoon. I'll need to have a mask on, but I don't think I'm at any great risk or putting others at risk, given that the event I was at was small, was outdoors, was casual. It was in the sunshine and the breeze. We were all vaccinated. I'm very surprised that Lindsey Graham has managed to develop COVID-19, even though he's vaccinated. But as Senator Graham has said, he would be much worse off if he hadn't been vaccinated. I've been fully vaccinated, and I encourage viewers to take these vaccines. They are safe and they are effective, and they're the only way we're going to get out of this pandemic.
Yeah, Senator Graham seemed very grateful that he was fully vaccinated. And I think that's a good message for you know, people that admire him. It might encourage them to get out and get vaccinated, because we still have 100 million people in this country who are not vaccinated. So, all right, let's get started, Senator. With COVID, let's just stay on topic here. We really do seem to be in this new phase of the pandemic. The Delta variant, oh, it's nasty, raising the stakes for vaccines and masks. And the big question is, will the kids be back in school in the fall? So I took to the streets to get the pulse of the people. Have you taken the COVID vaccine?
Oh no, am I going to be tracked? No, I have not.
You have not. So no judging.
Okay.
Why not?
It's not approved yet. It's still so new. I just want to make sure that people don't grow extra eyeball or extra arm.
Oh my God.
That's all.
So, what's really happening today? After months and months of cases going down, we're seeing a spike in COVID cases. They're going up. Why? Because of this new form, this new variant called the Delta variant.
My thoughts on making it mandatory, no, not really. Not mandatory, but more information to the person, because if you say mandatory, people might get rebellious and not want to do it. So if you say it's to get more information and learn about it, then more people might be susceptible to getting started.
It's possible that even if you've been vaccinated, you could still actually have a pretty high viral load in your nose.
They don't have the right to tell us what we should be doing with our children. I'm not vaccinating my children. There's people in there that can't wait to vaccinate their children.
I think when we start telling other people that you need to do something to protect me, we get into very dangerous territory. And I still feel that divide. There is a middle ground here. I just don't know if we're going to get to it before things get worse.
CDC recommends that everyone in K-12 schools wear a mask indoors, including teachers, staff, students, and visitors, regardless of vaccination status.
Our surest way to stamp down this variant is to stop allowing it to spread, which is what masks do. Kids, by and large, fare much, much, much better in a mask in school than unmasked in front of a computer.
I don't want it to mess with my reproductive system. There's just a couple health factors. I don't know, I'm just unsure if I want to or not. And I already had COVID, so I don't know.
How about that? Already had COVID and worried about fertility issues?
Fertility issues, I have no children. I would like children.
It was very important. It was because of my health as an asthmatic, and then also because of my job. I think it should be mandated to mandatory. That way everyone is safe.
If we have our 2 shots, are we, the public, gonna have to get a 3rd shot, like a booster, you know, if we have to have that as well?
So, Senator, I'm going to pepper in some questions and some comments, too, from our viewers as they come in. The first one is from John on Twitter. He wanted me to ask you this. What is your strategy to persuade those who have not gotten vaccinated to do so? What do you say?
Great question, Mike. I think it's important that we have community leaders, admired public figures, and that sadly doesn't often mean elected officials. That means faith leaders. That means recording artists and sports figures. It means people who have credibility in different communities, sharing their personal stories of having gotten successfully and safely vaccinated. Friends of mine who are doctors in Delaware have taken vaccination campaigns to churches, to community centers, to help make sure that there's folks, whether they're African American or Latino, whether they're conservatives or evangelicals, of whatever background, just to say, here's someone from your community, from your church, or from your political affiliation who has also been vaccinated, who is safe and healthy as a result. Sadly, just a few minutes ago today on the floor of the Senate, a colleague of mine shared with me, he is conservative, he's a white evangelical from the heartland of the country. A close friend of his died of COVID just a few days ago. He wasn't vaccinated. He refused to get vaccinated. This is a Republican senator who is himself vaccinated, and he just said to me, it's so sad that people are needlessly dying because they have concerns or hesitation.
I know.
We have had more than 650,000 Americans die, more than 35 million cases of COVID. There are no documented risks to these vaccines that would make it safer to avoid vaccination than to get vaccinated.
And I think it really helped about a week ago. Quite a few Republicans, even some that were vaccine hesitant, as they call it, came out and said, get the vaccine. It's safe. I did it. My family did it. And you know what? Over the last 3 or 4 days, vaccination rates have gone up in every one of our states. I think it helped.
I think it did help. And, you know, frankly, Mike, these vaccines were developed at the initiative of the Trump administration.
Right.
Operation Warp Speed happened when President Trump was president. So one of the things that I think is unfortunate is that there wasn't more a bipartisan celebration of that vaccine. It's a remarkable scientific accomplishment to go from a global pandemic breaking out February, March of last year to having a functional vaccine available, hundreds of millions of doses available here in the United States in less than a full year. So folks should take advantage of this opportunity to get vaccinated and to be safe.
Senator, it reminds me of what happened, and Megan, if you could cue up the White House tape here. a reporter asked Jen Psaki, who is the White House press secretary, this question about getting President Trump involved.
On vaccine hesitancy, as COVID-19 cases rise, if this is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated and you guys are having a hard time getting a certain part of the population to go get the shot, would President Biden ever call former President Trump and say, I need your help, let's cut a PSA and tell people to go do it?
What do you think of that idea, Senator?
I think it'd be great to have officials from the last administration, including President Trump, and leaders from the current administration locking arms and saying to the American people, this is in your interest. This is for everyone. This is for our country. President Trump and many members of his family have been vaccinated.
Sure.
And I think it might help folks who have hesitancy about taking the vaccine to know that he has been vaccinated. I will say it would be nice if President Trump would recognize that President Biden is the duly elected president. But that's not what you're asking me about. You're asking me about the vaccine
all
and
the other
public health.
former living presidents did a PSA. Here's the deal, Senator. You're famous for bringing both sides together, both sides of the aisle. Maybe you make that call this evening to former President Trump, ask him if he would do it.
You know, it's funny. I just spoke to Alex Azar, who was his Secretary of Health and Human Services just last week. So I will see what I can get done, Mike.
Let me know.
I did do a PSA after getting vaccinated. I did do a PSA with the senator and congresswoman from Delaware. But, you know, the three of us are all Democrats.
Well, yeah. Okay. It was late this morning when this news came out of New York City that Mayor de Blasio is going to initiate a vaccine mandate. It goes into effect in about 2 weeks, but it'll be endorsed in about 4 weeks, like mid-September. Do you think it's time for a national mandate?
You know, Mike, I hesitate to endorse a national vaccine mandate just because there are so many folks who resist the idea of vaccination, either on personal or religious grounds, who either for political reasons or because of doubt or hesitancy. The ultimate question I have is, what's the most effective way for us to get the most people vaccinated? When I was a kid, my recollection was you had to be vaccinated against measles and mumps and rubella just to go to school.
I stood in that line.
I talked to Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell of Kentucky, about this last week. You know, he had polio when he was a child, and he was just confessing that he doesn't understand why people are resistant to vaccines when that's largely what eradicated polio in the United States. So I would certainly consider it. I hope we don't need to do something that drastic, but the number of cases that have been emerging recently in the last few weeks because of this newly transmissive variant, the Delta variant, reminds us that as long as we haven't vaccinated the overwhelming majority of the American people, we're not safe.
Yeah.
And we also need to vaccinate a majority of the world, or these variants are going to keep emerging from other countries and reinfecting us.
So maybe, like I said, both sides of the aisle here. So you wouldn't go as far as Mayor de Blasio with a vaccine mandate in New York City, but you probably wouldn't go as far the other direction like Governor DeSantis of Florida. Listen.
If you have been listening to some of the murmurs going around, particularly in Washington lately, if you listen to some of the stuff that's being percolated around the CDC, there's a movement to try to impose more restrictions on the American people. And I just want to say in Florida, there will be no lockdowns. There will be no school closures. There will be no restrictions and no mandates in the state of Florida.
And I got a comment from one of our viewers, Senator. He says, you can't be pro-mask and pro-vaccine and be pro-freedom at the same time. Would you agree with that?
Look, one of the central characteristics of the United States and the American people is a passionate commitment to individual liberty and to our freedoms. But one of the real challenges of governance, whether it's the ground rules for schools or for public pools, playgrounds, is balancing that passionate commitment to individual liberty with protecting public health and with making sure that we are not in the middle of a public health crisis so profound that we are killing each other by insisting on our liberty first and our health last. I'll remind you, 650,000 Americans have died from this pandemic. The only way we could stop it last year was to shut down schools and workplaces. You know, the rails and the airlines all had to shut down for months. And millions of kids lost ground because they stayed home from school.
We don't want to do that
Millions
again.
of businesses closed for good. We don't want to do that again. And so we have to balance. If people are responsible and wear masks appropriately and get vaccinated, we can avoid mandates and shutdowns.
Well, you're talking about shutdowns.
But as Governor Ivey of a southern state recently said, this new pandemic is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. 97% of the people in hospital right now for COVID are unvaccinated.
You talk about shutdowns. Let's talk about the economics of COVID. We got this in from Michael, who lives in Newark, Delaware. He's worried about money right now. He wants to know if there possibly could be another stimulus check. Listen.
What could you do to help people, as far as someone in my situation, with receiving pandemic eligibility funds for unemployment? What can we do? There's nothing that we can do. We're up in the air with no funds coming in, and we still can't get jobs.
Could there be another stimulus check?
Well, Mike, I think that's unlikely. We pushed out the door $4 trillion last year. The very first pandemic response bill, the CARES Act last March, passed the Senate unanimously. And between that and a series of other bills, from last March to today, we've put more than $4 trillion. For the average American family of four, they got a check for $5,600. Just, you know, part of the American Rescue Plan, checks to help people with meeting back rent, with, you know, putting food on the table and keeping a roof over their family's head. We also extended a significant unemployment benefit, an additional benefit of $300 a week from the beginning of this year through the end of this month. And we put a huge amount of resources into schools and hospitals, into state and county governments, and into supporting small businesses through the PPP program.
We got all that.
We really have put a lot of money into putting a floor under this economy. But Mike, if I could, if the gentleman you just had on, Mike from Newark, if he's having trouble accessing either unemployment benefits or the stimulus check, he didn't receive it, he can call my office at 573-6345 in Wilmington, Delaware, or get a hold of me through my website at coons.senate.gov. We have helped thousands of Delawareans, either small businesses to get their PPP loans, or folks who are unemployed to figure out how to get unemployment, or individuals who needed help navigating the stimulus check process.
Again, we got to keep moving because we have so much to cover. Gun violence, my gosh, there's another epidemic in America, all the gun violence, almost in every big city. So again, we're going to stay in Wilmington here in Delaware. This is Reverend El Amin from Wilmington.
Well, what I would like to know with Senator Coons more than anything is how can he, or what programs, what can we do about not only the overdoses, but the gun violence in this world? Because the United States now has really became like a war zone. I mean, we pulled the troops out of Iraq, but we're bringing them right home to our own war zone.
You know, we covered this on Good Day Philadelphia just last week. In Wilmington, there were 3 different shootings in just a few hours. I'm sure you remember that. I don't know if anybody can answer this. What do you, 2 things. What do you think the reason is for the uptick in violence across America? And then this is one I'm at a loss. What's the solution? What's the reason first?
So violent crime overall is down compared to the 80s and 90s, but we have seen a really significant uptick in shootings and murders in the last few months. In Wilmington, we've tragically seen far too many people shooting each other and dying at the hands of others in recent months. And this is a trend that is true across the whole country in cities and counties, large and small. I think, frankly, Mike, part of it is the pressure of the pandemic, the economic pressure, the social pressure, the mental health pressure of folks being cooped up and inside for months and months and months on end, the hopelessness and the family dysfunction. We've seen dramatic increases in addiction, in overdose deaths, and in folks being taken to the hospital from overdoses. And the reason that also then I think connects to gun violence is you've got an increase in opioid addiction and drug dealing, and we don't have strong enough enforcement of the laws on the books to make it harder to get a hold of guns if you're a felon. President Biden has proposed $100 million in additional funding for violence interruption programs, for community-based grassroots programs that use respected community leaders to intervene when there's a cycle of shootings that starts, where, you know, one person shoots another, and you can predict that there's going to be a bunch of folks with guns going out looking to, you know, take some retribution. There are violence interruption programs throughout the country that have shown to be an effective grassroots and community-based model that often engages the faith community as well. I'd look forward to hearing from Reverend Alameen with his ideas about what we ought to be doing to more strongly enforce the existing laws preventing straw purchases of guns and to invest in community violence interruption.
I got to tell you, this is a lot of our viewers say we got to stop blaming this on the pandemic. They're not buying that anymore, and that we need to move on. But I need to move on and talk about, now this is we're going to try to make this not boring. And I rely on you, Senator Coons, to not make this boring. I'm talking about infrastructure. Believe it or not, a few hours ago, Philadelphia was named the best large city in America with the best roads. That was by the United States Chamber of Commerce. So if we're number one, that's how bad roads and bridges are across this country. Come on. There are 40,000 bridges in America that have been deemed in poor condition, need to be repaired. So the infrastructure bill, I think at one point, President Biden wanted $2.2 trillion. It's down to $1.2 trillion. Still a ton of money. And people are screaming at the TV, where are we getting all this money? Where do we begin? Let's try to go through some of the different categories. Go ahead and put that on the screen as I talk about this. Is broadband still in the bill? Because there's about 40% of us in America, well, I have it, but 40% of the people in America don't have broadband. Here's more.
You may have heard that in Washington now, just from the phone, looks like we reached a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, fancy word for bridges, roads, transit system, high-speed internet.
I'm not really sure about that. I mean, we all need money. They all need money. Being as though COVID shut down everything, everybody needs help to get out. So why are we putting more money into the infrastructure when we should be giving money to places and businesses that need the help? That money should be going to communities and making sure that the communities are being built up in a better way.
If you're on the rails, if you're in a car, if you're basically wanting to get on internet, your bridges and your roads, everything, the airports, we've touched everything here. This is what's bringing America together.
I think that it should go to low-income internet individuals that can't afford it, because schools are getting ready to start back up. Some schools are giving them choices: stay at home or come to class. And if they stay at home and don't have internet, then they can't learn.
This is not the time to continue spending and spending and spending until our grandkids are left sitting in a pit of debt so deep they will never climb out of it.
At a time when Washington seems broken, this group of members behind me came together, along with others, and decided we were going to do something great for our country.
Yeah, I think they should help economically deprived neighborhoods because, you know, you want to beautify your city and all of that, and that's really well, but if you do just the main part of the towns and not the outskirts, you know, that's where the problems come in, where a lot of the drugs and the killings, and it's getting out of control now. It's getting bad, you know, and those money should be for the poor, you know, neighborhoods, to bring them up to par too.
Senator, that was Melvin Gorman from Wilmington, as a matter of fact, that you just heard from there, saying fixing things up is one thing, but there are bigger problems, and all the money should be going to other places. Some members of the House seem to feel kind of the same, that it's just way too much money. What say you?
Well, Mike, I'm proud to be a part of the bipartisan group that has negotiated and is now voting on in the Senate the $550 billion in new infrastructure spending over 5 years. It is going to make things like roads and bridges, tunnels and highways, traditional hard infrastructure, more modern, more competitive, but it's also going to strengthen broadband. So whether your kids were home from school trying to connect to school through Wi-Fi, or as you're driving up and down the state of Delaware, your calls drop several times, whether you're in a low-income or inner-city community and you have difficulty affording broadband that's widely available, or you're in a rural part of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Delaware where you can't get broadband signal, the $65 billion for broadband in this bill will help build out this infrastructure of the 21st century and make it accessible and affordable to people of all backgrounds in our community.
That's interesting. I mean, the bridges and the bad roads and all that, that all kind of explains itself. By the way, if you want to move to Philly, we have the best roads in America. Real quickly, can I just thought back to the gun violence thing. Where are we with AmeriCorps now? Because I think that might help.
It might. So AmeriCorps is a 25-year-old program that combines local nonprofits that take initiative to do volunteer service to communities to address things from veterans and mental health to the environment and tutoring in schools. There are about 75,000 AmeriCorps members serving right now all over the country. I fought hard for and secured $1 billion in the American Rescue Plan in January to expand AmeriCorps. And one of President Biden's leading proposals for how to deal with climate change and how to give a younger generation of Americans skills, an opportunity to earn money for college, and a chance to be a part of improving our country is through a new civilian climate corps that would nationally help with states and communities preparing for climate change and improving resilience, whether you're in a low-lying state like Delaware that has marshes and wetlands, or you're in Colorado and they need help fighting wildfires. I think it can help bring our country together. It has broad bipartisan support, and I appreciate you asking about it, Mike.
Well, I appreciate you coming here, and at least in your own box there from, where are you, by the way? I don't even know where you are.
I'm in Washington, D.C.,
okay.
actually just a few hundred feet from the Capitol right now.
Okay. Thank you, Senator, for debuting this new series we have here, Pulse of the People. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Mike. I hope next time we can do it in person.
That'd be great. That would be great. And thank you for being with us. Your Pennsylvania lottery drawing is next. And then Dish Nation, and then Shayna and Thomas in for Jason. They'll have the Fox 29 News at 10, of course. I'll see you in the morning for Good Day Philadelphia.